So again, we are playing with string processing here. And we're going to get used to the basic blocks by messing around. And one problem I wanted you to take a look at is the code for vowel count. So this is set up to ask for a sentence and then wait. And it's going to then loop over the sentence. So notice here we have a repeat length of the answer. So again, Scratch can look at a string and say how many characters are in that string. And so we can loop through it. When you do something like that, you're often going to want to counter to see which position you're at in the string. So notice we have a set POS that stands for position to 1. And then as we run through this repeat loop, the last thing we do is we change position by 1. So we've looked at the first character, then we're done with the loop, we switch to the second character and the third character and so on. Now, this part here is sometimes optional, but sometimes necessary. The letter in position whatever of the thing we're looking at, the string we're looking at, they're grabbing that and setting it equal to CH for character. Okay. Now, it's possible to do some of these things without that, but in this case, since we are repeatedly checking CH, that character, whether it's A, E, I, O, or U, if we didn't do this set at the beginning of the repeat loop, then this letter position of answer would have to be listed inside this if 5 different times, which makes the whole thing harder to read and look at. So there are a lot of times where instead of repeatedly running letter position of answer here, we're just going to grab that character and then look at it after. Otherwise, we're recalling this code letter position of answer over and over and over and over again, which has a little work involved to it. And then if it's true, if it's any one of those things, we're just going to each increase vowel count by 1. Otherwise, there's no else. We just jump to changing position, and then we keep running through that. So all this simply does, this is a great example of how to loop through some string. String here was given as an answer. Okay. So let's get something like this started and play around. What I want to do is something a little bit different. Instead of counting the vowels in there, what I want to do is treat it like a kind of a kid's game where somebody gives me a word and then I spell the word back. Like if somebody gave me the word apple, then I would spell apple one letter at a time for them. So here's what I want us to try and program. So a string, remember, is a collection of characters. So we're going to get some string. Let's say the string that we get is apple. Then what I want my script to do is I want it to repeat however long the string is. And inside the repeat, I want to then say one letter at a time. So I would say A, then AP, and then A, P, P, and so on till I've said all of the letters. And then when I'm done, I can do something like say, spells apple. See if we can pull this off. Help me out. So I highly recommend you play along. I'm going to get a new Scratch script. And again, the vowel count is kind of a good model on how to start this. So I'm just going to give this a title. I was going to call it messing around, but since I have a definite idea here, I'm going to call this spell word. Pop these off for a minute. And I'm just going to get the basic structure set up, and then I'm going to brainstorm some other things I need to do it. Get off there, please. There you go. So event, we're just going to start this when the flag is clicked, because that's the easiest thing to do to start something. And then as soon as it starts, we're going to ask, type a word. Now, I'm just going to pull the answer option out to the side because we'll use that in a minute. And then I'm going to go back to control, and I'm going to repeat And what we're going to repeat is for the length of whatever word we're given. So when we loop through a string like this, we usually need a couple of things. So back to my notes here. I want to keep track that there is a first letter and a second letter and a third letter and so on. That was a crappy 3. Let's try again. So I need some kind of counter. And then I need a variable to collect this information in. So I'm going to need a variable to collect those. Let's say I'm going to call that spell word. So for sure, I think I need those 2 variables to be able to make this happen. So let's add some variables and start setting things. So for variables here, I'm just going to rename my variable. That can be my counter. And then I'm going to make another variable to spell the word out, 1 letter at a time. And usually for variable names, I like to do camel case, so lowercase spell, capital W, and then lowercase for the rest of the word. And we need to start initializing these. So I want to, somewhere in the beginning, I want to set counter. And sometimes we do set a counter to 0. Since I'm counting the letters in the word, and there's a first letter and a second letter and so on, I'm going to start with my counter at 1. And then the spell word, I'm going to uncheck it. I don't need to display it. I want to set spell word. Now, spell word is going to be a string. So when you initialize a string, you should initialize it to emptiness. So click where the 0 is there and just delete it. So spell word is now an empty string. Okay. Whereas counter is now a variable representing the number 1. And then we're going to update that. All right. So in my loop, I said I want to say back these letters and collect them. So I need to get the letter. So back to operators, there is a letter blank of, and the answer, I'm only asking one thing, so I can reuse answer here. So I'm just going to grab the answer and say of answer. And then I want, let's see, counter. So originally counter is 1. So this would grab the first letter of whatever the answer is. And I want to rebuild that as a new word. So I'm going to, when we change a variable, we use the change by a number. When we update a string, we have to do a set on it for a string. So I'm just going to pull the pieces I need out and put them over here. And what I want to do is I want to join. So back to my sketch here, what I'm trying to do, I want to grab the first letter, stick that inside my spell word, and then each time I go to the next letter of the answer, I'm going to put dash and then the next letter. Okay. And there's a couple of it. Let's just do it. So again, I need to join. What am I joining? Well, I'm taking whatever spell word was, and I'm joining it with the next letter in the loop. And then what I want to do is I want to set spell word to this new collection. And I did something like this last week when I was playing around with loops. So again, so the point of this here, spell word the first time in the loop is going to be an A, then it's going to be A-P, then it's going to be A-P-P. We're going to keep appending to it. Okay, so again, the way you append to a string is you have to use a join with the string and whatever you want to stick on the end of it. Right? So my existing string is on the left side, the new stuff goes on the right side. Okay. Well, hang on, let me do some more of this and then you can tell me about that in a minute, Aiden, okay? All right, so again, I need to collect this over and over again and then say what's going on. So now I'm going to go over to my looks and I'm going to say for 2 seconds. And I'm going to say spell word. All right, so let's compare my code here to what I'm trying to do in my notes. So again, I want somebody to enter a word like apple, and then I want to repeat as many times as apple has letters. And I want to say the first letter, and then keep looping first letter, second letter, second letter, third letter, right? And this is just going to appear on the screen for 2 seconds, right? So once it says this, it's gone, and then it's going to say that. Then that's gone, and then it's going to say that. So it's going to look like it's just increasing 1 letter at a time, is what should happen here, right? And then once it's all done, I want to say spells apple. So let's add a final say and see what happens. So inside the loop, I want to keep adding on to this. And then once I'm done with the loop, I'm going to say without 2 seconds, and I'm going to need a join to say that. So operator join spells space. What am I going to say? Spells what? Am I going to spell word, or am I going to spell the answer? What's the difference between them? Answer. Yeah, answer, because spell word has all the dashes in between. I want it without the dashes, okay, which is the original one. So I'm just going to say answer. Oops. All right. So first draft, based on my notes, let's see if it works. So I'm just going to click on the flag, and I'm going to spell A-P-P-L-E, and hopefully my sprite, A, oh shit, what did I forget to do?
I did.
I forgot to increase my counter, yeah. Otherwise, just going to say A over and over again. So I need to change counter by inside the loop 1 each time. So it jumps to the next letter.
Doing that, he's just being very slow on
Yeah, he's stuttering there. All right, so A-P-P-L-E. Okay, so it did spell it 1 letter at a time. What did I miss?
You don't put a dash.
Yeah, I missed putting in a dash in there. Not a big deal. It's just an additional join that needs to happen with a slight catch. So I'm going to go to my operators. I'm going to grab another join. And what I want to do is whatever spell word has, I want a hyphen to appear next, and then the next letter.
There'd be a space.
You could put a space or not. I'm going to choose to not put spaces in there. And often I make decisions like that, and later I'm like, maybe a space would be good. You got to play around. All right, one more time. A-P-P-L-E. Oh, dash A. The dash P is good. Dash another P, that's good. That's looking good. Looking good. Spells apple. Okay, not bad. Okay, what was one problem with that? The dash in the beginning. Okay, so there's a couple of different ways we can handle that. I did something like this last week, and I offered 2 different ways to deal with it. So I'm just going to let that rest for a few minutes. There's 2 different ways we can handle that dash in the beginning, right? So if I run this again, let's just do a shorter word like cat. Dash C. I don't want the dash at first. I only want the dash after the first letter. So there's at least 2 ways to handle that. I'm going to give you a minute to try something, and then I'll show you my 2 ideas on how to deal with it. Okay, so this is one draft of a solution to what I was hoping to do.
Something was important.
In trying to recreate your code, I broke my original code.
Ah. You had it working a little bit?
Yeah. I changed it to match your code, but it broke it.
Oh, okay, let's. Breaking code is fun because then you get to fix it.
I'm. Word counter to one. There, that word blank. Blank for answer. That's the word is. Word join. This should fix it.
Does anybody have a suggestion on one way to deal with that starting hyphen? What's that? Yeah, if then else is one way to do it. If it's the first letter, don't put a hyphen. If else, put a hyphen in. Yeah, that totally works. Anybody have another suggestion? There's another way to do it.
I copied your code, but
Yeah, Miku says just do the A, the first letter outside the loop, and then run the loop one less time. So the two options are, you could put an if then else inside the repeat, which is my mouse, so that it checks to see if if you're on position one. If you are, no hyphen. Otherwise, we put this code for the second part. The other option is outside the loop before the repeat, set the first letter in spell word, and then in your repeat, just make length one shorter. So do length of answer -1, and that would work too. Okay, so there's a couple different options on how to handle that, and they're both good options. All right, now other things we could do with this, like we could take a string somebody gives us, and we could, instead of making hyphen separated, we could make it space separated. We could make it comma separated. We could do lots of different things with something somebody gives us. All right, next thing I want to try is counting how many words there are in a sentence.
it's not. Can you know
Let me
what
take a look.
went wrong?
Take a look. So you got the word count at the bottom, word, say letter one, which word count by one, join. So word is blank. And then you're gonna join. Oh, you need inside here in your set, you want show you my code here. You need to select letter count of the answer. That's what you're missing. So you got to select the letter to join. All right, now I just, yeah, I'm just gonna leave it a spell word. Now, remember, if this is something you want to save for future use, then if you wanted to make a new script, again, you could add another sprite, but since my title is spell word, it makes more sense to make a new one. Otherwise, I could change this to like chapter 8 play, and then have a sprite called spell word and another sprite called words in a sentence. I'm going to choose to just make a new script. And this script is going to be called count words. And before I start throwing code together, I just want to write an example and think about how I'm going to make this happen. All right, so let's say my sentence is I have a fat cat named Sal. So I'm going to say the cat is fat is my sentence. And for now, I just want to use simple sentences, because the main thing I want to do in this case is identify, oh, here's a word, here's another word, and I identify words because we separate them by spaces. So as I look at the string I'm given, once I see a space, then I want to say, oh, here I can count word one. So I want to count through. This is word one. And then once I get to the next space, I say, oh, look what I just found. I just found word two. And then over here, there's another space. So that's word three. And then finally, when I see a period, I can say, ah, all right, before that is word four. Right. So a space or a period is going to be my trigger to say, I found a word. And then I just want to keep track. Now, keeping track of the individual words, that's a bit harder. I'm not going to worry about that. I just want to be able to say, I found word one, I found word two, I found word three. That's just updating a counter. All right. So I need a couple of different counters to make this happen. So I'm going to need to count the characters. And I'm going to want to count the words. And to make this a little bit extra fun, I'm going to add another idea in here. What I want to have happen is when I find a word, I want to say word one is the. And then when I find my next word, I want to say word two is cat. And so on until I'm done. So if I'm going to go that far, instead of just saying I found one word, two words, three words, four words, there were four words. If I want to say what each word is, I'm going to need another variable to keep track of the words as I find them. So I'm going to add another variable to make this happen right here. And I think I'll call that found word. All right, let's give it a try. So, you have the basics, what they call the boilerplate for the code. I want a when flag is clicked. I want an ask in there. I'm going to have to deal with the answer. I'm going to need a repeat in there, and I'm going to need some variables. Now, often I have a variable called counter if I'm just counting one thing, but if you got a lot of different things to count and you're not using procedures to scope your variables, then you want to give those counters specific names. So I have my character counter and I have my word counter. So I'm going to call the first one char for character counter. And I'm just renaming the my variable for that. And then I'm going to want a word counter. And again, to count the words in a sentence, that's really all I need for variables, but I want to take it one step further. Because I want to, each time I find a word, I want to say word one is the, word two is cat, and so on. So we got to collect those words in another variable. So again, I'm going to make another variable, and that's going to be called found word. All right, So then we need to what's called initialize the variables. We need to give them some set value for the start of it. So I'm going to need 3 sets in here for now, because I'm going to need to set my char counter. And that's counting the first letter and the second letter and so on. So I definitely want to start that with a 1. I want to set my word counter. Now, for word counter, I don't want to set it to 1 until I've actually found a word. So that one's going to start off with 0. I haven't found any words yet. And then found word, that's going to be a string. So we're just going to set that to emptiness. So click on the 0 and then delete it. All right, so let's see. Back to my notes before I do some more. How do I know I found a word again? Yeah, when I see a space or a period in this case, because at the end of the sentence, there isn't a space. I got to say, hey, you just found a word, and that's when I see the period. Okay. And again, I've made that mistake before. I'm like, oh yeah, if you have a space, you found a word. But again, we're anticipating a period at the end. So what I need is I need an if. And what I'm checking for in the if is if I find a space, and this is how we indicate a space when we're writing it on paper for computer stuff, a little square looking thing like that. Or if I find a period. That's my best period right there. And if I found one of those, then I have a word. Now, if I'm looking at the letter, the character in the string, and I didn't find one of those, then I'm going to need an else. Right? And in the else is where I need to be collecting letters so that I can say what the word is. So in the else, I'm going to collect letters. For the found word. And I just want to loop through that. All right, so other things we're going to need in here. We're going to need an if, then, else, not 2 ifs. That would not be a good way to do this. We want an if, then, else. And we are looking for a space or a period. So I'm going to put this equals inside the or here. And all right, we'll fill that in a minute. So again, where the first 50 is, I'm going to make that the space. So I'm going to highlight the 50 and I'm going to type space on the keyboard. And for the other one, I'm going to get rid of the 50 and I'm going to put a dot. And then we need some other things, like we need to select a letter. And let's see, what else do I need? I'm going to need a join in a minute. So let's grab that in here. I'm going to need a length. That I definitely know where it goes. So let's start putting these things together. The if then is going to go inside here. All right. So a couple ways I can continue from here. Right now, character counter is set to 1. So for my variables, I can go, let's turn that off, grab char counter and stick it in here. And I am looking for letters inside the given answer. And what I want to do is I want to drop that in here. And I want to say, is the letter in the current part of the loop, like I'm in the first part, is that letter in the answer a space? And I'm just going to duplicate this sucker right there. Or is it a dot? Now, if it is, what's going to happen? Well, I just want to say, hey, I found a word. So I'm just going to do that for now. So looks, say, and we'll make this more interesting in a minute, but I'm just going to say, found a word. Okay, now one slight problem with my code is I'm starting to repeat blocks of code. Like I just duplicated this right here. And doing that once or twice isn't a big deal, but if it happens too much, then you want to do something different. So an example of doing something different there, if we look back at the textbook, where'd you go? Over here now. When we were looking at the vowel count code, to only have to do that once, they had another variable for the actual character and they just grabbed that. And then they could use that over and over again. Okay, so we have a couple of choices. We could either keep cloning letter position of answer or duplicating it, or we could make that into a variable and then just reuse that variable. Okay, so for the moment, I'm just going to leave it like I have it there. Okay, so what if it's not a space or a period? What do I want to do with that? So like I was thinking my sentence was the cat is fat. So first it finds a T. The T isn't a space, it's not a period. I want to hold it for now, right? Because I want to keep the word. So what I want to do is I want to update my found word. So variables. Now, again, when we're changing a string, we don't use change. That's a numerical changer. We're going to use set. And we're going to use set with a join. And what we're doing is we're setting whatever found word is. So this says set found word to itself and then join it with, what do we want to join it with? Well, we want to join it with the letter that we're on. So I'm just going to duplicate this again. So again, thinking back to my first decision here, I decided not to make an extra variable for the letter, which means I have to each time go back to the answer and get the letter. Now, every time I call this block here, Scratch has to go get that function and use it. So now I'm starting to think, well, maybe I should have made an extra variable for that. I'm going to hold off on that for a moment. All right, so what do I have going on so far? We are going to repeat length of whatever the answer is, the sentence somebody gave us. And we're going to check to see if the character we're looking at is a space or a period. If it is, we're going to say something about finding a word. And if it isn't a space or a period, it means I have a letter and a word. And I'm going to take that letter and stick it inside found word by joining it to it. What else needs to happen? So outside of the if then else, I want to update my counter. So we're going to change, pair counter by 1. Where should we put the change word count? Yeah, in here where I say I found a word. Yeah, anytime I found a space or a period, I'm going to update the word counter. All right, so this is coming along. Let's see, I don't need, oh yeah, I'm going to use that in a sec. All right, so now I want to start putting together my sentence for when I do find a word. So back to my notes here. So I want to say word 1 is the. So to make that happen, I'm going to have to say word with a space. Then I'm going to have to say 1. Then I'm going to have to say is with spaces on each side and the. So I need joins with 4 spots to be able to say that right there. So join, let's grab another join. And I like to stick them in the second spot. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So I want to say the space variables word counter first. Let's see. Did I get my sentence right? Oh no, word one is. There we go. That's what I was going to say. Word space one instead of apple here, space is space. And then at this point, found word should be a whole word. So I want to throw found word in the end. So this should say something like word one is the. All right. And again, when you're coding, a lot of people sometimes have the practice, they get this idea in their head, oh yeah, I think I can do that pretty quick. And they start slapping code together and running it and see if it runs. It can save a little time to have some notes, to help your notes guide you through it. All right, so I started a loop that's going to go through as many characters as the sentence has. All right. And then inside that loop, I want to check for a space or not. If there isn't a space, then I want to rebuild a single word at a time. And if I find a word, I want to say the word. Okay, so let's go back. I think I'm missing something here. So I find my first space, right? And I say the first word is the. Then what happens? Well, it jumped in here. It's going to skip the else. It's going to change char count by 1. It's going to jump back up to the top and go to whatever the next place is. The next place is now the C here for cat. And it finds that C. The C is after the space. Oops, wrong button, back here. And then, so that's not a space or a dot, it's a C. So it jumps down here and it increases found word by the letter C. What am I missing there? I have one problem. What's found word at the moment? Found word is the. And now I'm putting a C on there. I get the A and the T, and then it's going to say word 2 is what? It's going to say the cats. Okay. So after I find a word, what else do I need to do with found word? I need to wipe it out. So I need to go in here. Once I found a word, I need to then reset found word to nothingness so that I can get just the next word. So once I find that, and again, the order of operations is important. I want to say the word I found. After I say it, then I'm going to wipe it out so that I can continue looking for another word. All right. Is it going to work? I don't know. Let's see. I think I got all the pieces there. I think it matches my notes. All right. So I'm going to type. Oh, yeah, that looks okay. The cat is fat. And again, I need a space or a period at the end if I want to collect that last word. So that's important. And it's only going to run as long as there are characters. Word 0 is the. Word 1 is cat. Word 2 is. Word 3 is fat. Oh, and then it stopped. Okay, I'm close. All right. So earlier I said I wanted to start word counter at 0 because I haven't found any words yet. So I think I have an order of operations problem. Anybody see where it is? What is it, Jonathan?
You need to change word counter to
1 before I do the say. Yeah, so I want the order of operations to be like that. So once I found the word, say now, okay, finally I found a word. Now say the word 1 is whatever the found word is, then reset found word. Okay. Now, again, you could have changed that order and done word counter equals 1 before the loop runs, but then you're saying you found a word before you found one. And then at the end, it's going to update word counter again. And although it won't say it, it's going to think word counter is a 5th word that doesn't exist, which that bothers me a little bit. So I like this solution better than starting word counter at 1. Now, there's all kinds of other things I could do in here. I could do things like rewrite the sentence backwards with this. I could mess with the word a little bit before I say it. Like, anybody ever speak Pig Latin? Anybody ever heard of that? Pig Latin is where you take the first letter off, stick it at the end, and then throw an AY at the end. And you're going to do a Pig Latin experiment in a few minutes. So like my name translated to Pig Latin is you pull the first letter off, you stick it at the end, and then you throw an AY at the end. So like if I took the word book and Pig Latin it, it would be ook bay. So that's Pig Latin. So like if we wanted to, somebody gave a sentence, we could, instead of saying the word, we could rebuild the sentence by when we find a word, run it through a Pig Latin translator, and then rebuild a new sentence, all in Pig Latin, for example, with a loop like this. All right, now, in the beginning, when I did this, I said, I want the sentences to be simple. By simple, I meant just spaces separating them and a period to end it. But sentences can be more complicated, like they could have commas in there. I don't have a check for commas in here. Sometimes sentences have semicolons. Sometimes they have parentheses, right? So there's other things when I think about complex sentences I might want to consider. The most basic thing about a more complex sentence would be dealing with commas, right? But that's not too bad here. How would I adjust this to deal with commas? Any thoughts?
You just have that there before.
Yeah, I could put another or in here. Now there's a slight catch on that. Let's write a sentence with a comma and think about that for a sec. Yeah, so a third or is definitely the best way to go. Let's go back, insert. Maybe that's my sentence. The cat is fat, large, and happy. And then I'm just going to sneak in here. There's a space there. 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 So I'm not just looking for commas. I'm looking for what combination? Yeah, I'm looking for a space or a comma space or a period. Yeah. Okay, enough of that. Let's see, we looked at how to obtain a character in a string. What is a string? A few other fun things. Let's take a look at Pig Latin. So there is a Pig Latin example in the book, and there's a try it out that I want you to do. So let me bring that up. If you have access to the chapter scripts, I'd highly recommend getting that. But I think I actually made a link. If you don't have the chapter scripts, then I put a copy of the book's Pig Latin from the chapter scripts linked in the chapter 8 reading assignment. So you could go grab it there. And let's see what I want to do. I'm actually going to make a new version of this. I'm going to leave that one there. Get rid of that. And create a new Pig Latin. And this is in the book is Try It Out 8.2, which I'll bring up in a sec. So you can either grab Pig Latin from my link or from your chapter scripts if you have access to them today. But so I can get myself a new version so I don't mess up the version I linked to. So let's take a look at the script here. We've got a when flag is clicked, enter word. And then we take that answer and we send it to the Pig Latin procedure over here. So what does the Pig Latin procedure do? The Pig Latin procedure has an out word and a position. And it immediately sets position to 2. And it's going to repeat the length of the word -1. Okay, so let's think about why it's doing that again. So Pig Latin over here, you take a word, you pull off the first letter, which means you're starting at the second letter, and you only need to modify after that. In this case, instead of 4 letters, I have 2, 3, and 4. I stick that at the end, and then I slap an AY at the end. All right, so they're writing a procedure that does that. So we only have to run the loop -1 number of times again, because we're pulling that first letter off. That means we're starting on the second letter. Then they grab that character. Now, in my previous script, I chose not to grab the character. I just repeatedly reuse this here. Problem with that is I had to reuse that same block over and over again. It wasn't necessarily the best thing to do. Then we set outward to outward along with whatever character we have. And outward at the moment, if we click up there, should be empty. There shouldn't be a space there. If I click there and try to move arrow left and right, nothing happens, right? Outward is empty. Nothing in there. Not a space, nothing. So we've done that kind of thing before, right? This sets something to itself plus, right? So that's how we concatenate onto, add to a string. Back in there. Then we change position by 1. After we do that, so what exactly are we doing there? What does that loop do? So let's take a look in my notes, just make sure we know what's going on. So as it runs through the loop, it's starting the position right here. And it's going to make a thing called outward. And the first thing it's going to do to outward is it's going to slap that A on there. Then it runs through the loop and it goes and finds the next letter, and then it's going to put that on the end. And it loops again and it grabs that letter and it puts that on there. And then the loop's over because it ran word length -1 number of times. Then outside the loop, it's going to grab letter 1 of the original word. So I'm down here now. And it's going to call that CH, and then it's going to take that and stick it on outward. All right, so then it's going to go and do that. And then finally, it's going to slap an AY on the end there. So outward should now be, if we started with Gary, it should be Ari Gay. And then outside of Pig Latin, it's then going to say outward. Seems reasonable? Not too bad. So this is important about working with strings. In Scratch, we only have a few tools to work with when we work with a string. So just a reminder about what we can and can't do with strings. We can join strings together. We can identify a specific letter position. Given a position, we can grab the letter in the string. We can find the length of a string. And we haven't done this yet, but we can see if a string contains some specific character. Now, it doesn't have to be a letter. A string like the year 2023, that's a string made up of digits, right? So we could do something like 2023 contains a 1. And if I click back on that, that should read false. And if I asked if it contains a 2, that should read true. Things I don't have immediate access to are rebuilding a string without a loop, right? We got to use another string variable to remix that together, right? All right, so let's take a look at the book for this one right here. This is That one. All right, so here they describe what Pig Latin is, kind of like I just did. And this slightly different color scheme from Scratch 2 is the script we were just playing with. All right, so what do I want you to do with this now? Well, I want you to run it and see that it does turn things into Pig Latin by pulling off the first letter and throwing it at the end with an AY. And then some things you could do with it. You could reverse that and take something in Pig Latin and put it back into regular English. Like pull off the AY and then grab that last letter, put it back in the beginning. So you could make a translator from Pig Latin back to English. This is a translator from English to Pig Latin. Or you could merge Pig Latin with something like this word counter we made here, which loops through a sentence looking for words, and you can take a whole sentence and convert each of the words to Pig Latin. And then you're going to have a sentence in Pig Latin.
That's what I did.
So you have a couple of options there. So you pick which one you want to do. You could merge those two scripts together, or you could try to reverse and make a anti-Pig Latin, right? An out of Pig Latin kind of script. So I'm going to stop there for a little bit and let you guys play around with either making something from a procedure from Pig Latin to English, or try to merge the code from the sentence word finder to have it, instead of restating the sentence, convert each word to Pig Latin and then restate it. So those are your options. Play around for a bit. Wave me over or chat if you have a question about that.